All right, greetings. Welcome back to Black Bear News, where everything is connected. How's everyone doing? We're live on YouTube, Rockfin, and Callin at the moment. Let's get into it. There's lots to talk about today. Yeah, we're going to look at a couple of ways in which we're supposedly helping the climate or saving the climate, but destroying the climate. It's all very interesting. The question always is where to start. I'm always grabbing some things right at the very last moment before I start a show, and sometimes those things are really worthy of getting top billing, I guess, if you will. But look at this. So one of the ways in which we're living in a I don't know what you want to call it, oxymoronic or hypocritical paradigm is that we claim to be doing things that are going to save the environment. There are lots of proponents of this, the green energy, the renewable energy revolution, the net zero crowd. And if we only do the right things and enact the right policies, then we're going to fight the climate change. And what a lot of people do understand about this is we're just digging a deeper hole as far as destroying the environment. And if you're in a deep hole, one suggestion is that you stop digging. Right? Stop digging. We'll build new, cooler stuff. How about just stop building? How about stop the build part? This is from Keith Dickey. This is a lithium leach field. This is what your electric car batteries are made of. It is so neurotoxic that a bird landing on this stuff dies in minutes. Take a guess what it does to your nervous system. Pat yourself on the back for saving the environment. Yeah, maybe we should rethink going, headlong into some new technologies. Kind of like at the beginning of the automobile age, the fossil fuel age, maybe we should have rethought diving headlong into this new, available, cheap energy source. Maybe we should have thought about that one before we did it. And moving on to something in the same vein, excuse me. Well, we've talked about this. But Poppy Davis sent me this. More on the new, quote unquote climate bill. There's the new Inflation Reduction Act and there's a climate bill. And both of them are not very good for the environment, right? They're trying to tout that these things are good for the environment. The new climate bill would require the government to offer oil and gas leases on federal land and in the Gulf of Mexico. No wonder big oil likes it. Oil companies see net positive in the climate bill. Of course they do. Oil and gas executives are finding a lot to like in the Senate climate and energy bill, though they are still opposed to some provisions. The Inflation Reduction Act, negotiated by Democrat Chuck Schumer of New York and Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Democrats, is aimed at cutting U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by promoting cleaner forms of energy. At Manchin's urging, though, it would require the government to offer oil and gas leases on federal land and in the Gulf of Mexico, albeit at a higher royalty rate. It also provides tax incentives for projects that capture carbon dioxide in new forms of energy like hydrogen. The downside for the oil industry is a required minimum tax rate and a new fee on emissions of methane, a potent climate warming gas that's a major source of pollution in the oil field. Well, I guess, so that's a bit of a positive. We're just going to tax you for your pollution, right? While some trade groups say the bill would eliminate industry jobs, darn it, jobs. Several oil companies said they'll be shielded from tax increases and the methane fee and could benefit from some of the incentives. So, okay. They'll be shielded from the tax increases and methane fee. They have also voiced enthusiasm about a related proposal to reform the National Environmental Policy Act, which controls federal permits for pipelines and other infrastructure. Cheniere Energy, Inc., which operates liquefied natural gas terminals, is expected to apply for federal permits to expand its operations in Louisiana and Texas. Chief Executive Officer Jack Fusco said yesterday during a conference call with analysts, "I believe the permitting reform that's currently being talked about in D.C. is a very positive development," says a natural gas executive. "It should enhance the regulatory tailwinds for well-developed, commercially sound brownfield projects like ours and what we're about to propose." The American Exploration and Production Council, which represents independent oil and gas producers, says the bill's tax provisions would harm the industry. Oil and gas companies have benefited for decades from favorable tax laws that allowed them to recover the cost of drilling and depletion in the oil field. A lot of companies, including ConocoPhillips and Occidental Petroleum Corporation, said their tax bills are already above the minimum levy in the bill. Asked about the bill, Conoco CEO Ryan Lance echoed comments from several other oil executives who spoke with analysts this week. "I'm not sure if it's a good time, ever." Of course it's not. It's not ever a good time to increase your taxes, says everybody who pays taxes, right? Anybody. I'm not sure if it's a good time to be increasing taxes and increasing government spending. Just as a general economic policy, at least the agreement recognizes that natural gas and oil are an important part of the energy transition, are going to be here for decades. So that's positive. So they know. They know that fossil fuels are not going away, and you are not, they're not going to do anything about climate change. There's no actual action on climate change happening. Why? Because if you do that, you're kind of kicking the foundation out from under what we now know as industrial civilization. It took fossil fuel energy to build us up to this point. And if you take away the fossil fuels, that entire foundation is going to, the whole building crumbles, is what I'm trying to say. Exxon, the biggest U.S. oil company, was encouraged about the bill's incentives for new forms of energy. Exxon has said it won't invest in wind or solar power, but it's exploring ways to produce low emissions hydrogen and biofuels, which we know are a joke, to replace conventional fossil fuels. Anyways. Yeah, not a lot of actual action on climate change happening, and not anytime soon. So there's that. At least not in the U.S. On some levels, it seems like other places are doing more, like China and Europe. It seems like they're more aware of the problem than they are actually trying to do things about the problem. But they're a mixed bag of mixed messages as well. Kevin Jensen says, if it weren't for fossil fuels, Greta Thunberg would never have existed. That's funny. That's funny. Let's see. Let's look at this other interesting XR Extinction Rebellion post that Poppy put up. And this is also the reality of what scientists are seeing and saying. This is not, right? There's no people that are, pretty proficient in climate science. There's no people that are climate aware and climate science aware that are real climate scientists that are out here saying, blowing the whistle on, climate change is not a thing. There's none of those because it's not a conspiracy. That's why there's none of those. There are a few people out there that are, that try to say it's, famous examples are, the guy that supposedly the guy that started the Weather Channel and or one of the founders of Greenpeace. Okay. I think you need more people. Yeah, there's no like really deep, it's not the same as other things, right? Where there's a deep pool of experts and scientists that are like looking at the situation and going, yeah, it just doesn't add up to me. No, there isn't that. What there is a deep pool of scientists and experts on the subject matter who have been saying for a long time, this doesn't look good. This looks way worse than they've been telling you. They're not doing anything about this. We're headed for a disaster. We're headed into a brick wall. This is where we're going. Hello, can anybody pay attention? And what happens is that governments of the world and society at large is like, do you guys hear something? Did you hear anybody talking? Because I sure didn't. Let's go buy a boat. Let's go, whatever. I need another house. I need another car. I need another thing. I need another thing. Yay, industrial civilization. Go forward. Anyways, we'll where are we? We'll listen to this.
We now realize that the Earth does regulate itself, and that we know quite a bit about all the various systems. You see, it's a good theory. It's made no less than 10 predictions that have come true.
If we carry on the way we're going, I can't see this civilization lasting the end of this century. No chance, in my view, on the current trajectory.
If we get it wrong, so if we do the wrong things, then I think there's a very, very big risk that we will just end our civilization.
By something like 2040 to 2050, the European excessive summer of 2003, when over 20,000 people died of overheating, will be the norm. Every year will be as hot as that nearly. And the probability is that European agriculture will cease to produce food by then. It'll become a desert and scrub region, and there will be mass migrations. Anyone with an imagination can see the awful human consequences of that.
We risk crossing tipping points that shift the planet from being our best resilient friend, dampening our impacts, to start working against us, amplifying the heat.
Things like the melting Arctic sea ice the Amazon forest and so on. Once you get enough of these tipping points tipping, they could act like a row of dominoes where one could influence the next and influence the next.
There are also tipping points in society. We see tipping points when you go from horse-drawn carriages to automobiles, and that happened very, very quickly. In putting seatbelts in cars, in smoking, whether smoking is allowed or not allowed. So things can go very quickly in social systems.
2030 is really absolutely critical.
The next 10 years to 2030 must see the most profound transformation the world has ever known.
So yeah, when people are like, "Oh my God, they're really ramping up this climate rhetoric," well, maybe it's because things are really falling apart. And so, there will be attempts to rein the damage in. Those attempts will probably be way too short of the goal. And as you can see, whenever the attempts are made, there's a lot of pushback by human beings, right? Because humans are like, wait, hold on a second, we're not ready. We're not ready for this change. So either be ready for the change, or it's kind of like let go or be dragged. Either be ready for the change or be changed, whether you're ready or not, right? So. And I can assure you, you could probably guess which one is more uncomfortable. Changing whether you're ready or not is definitely not the one you want to go with. You want to be ready to get ready to change. Anyways. Moving on to extreme temperatures around the world. This is very interesting here. And I've seen a couple of things about this. So they're also trying to shift the baseline, right? There was another post actually I needed to grab in here that I thought was interesting. But it kind of correlated with this very interesting post about hold on one second. Hopefully I can find this quick. Here we go. Here we go. So Jessica posts this. Do you see how they moved the baseline up to 1951 to 1980? It wouldn't surprise me. Here's what's funny. I won't be surprised if they start using the 1990 to 2010 baseline just to keep telling people we are at 1C. Right. A 1980 baseline is a ridiculous baseline, right? Because a whole lot of industrial civilization happened before 1980. Right, that's just 1980s is just when things started kicking into super high gear, but there was a pretty high gear going on before then. Anyways, retweeting this in July 2022, the Arctic was 1.1 C warmer than the average July of 1951 to 1980. So 1.1, the Arctic is 1.1 above just from 1980. But let's move to this one. Let's move to this from extreme temperatures around the world. And I noticed, just when I saw this and I was like, now hold on a second. From extreme temperatures around the world, just in July 2022 in the United States had an average temperature of 76.42 Fahrenheit, 24.7 C, which is, get this, 2 degrees Fahrenheit above the 1991 to 2020 baseline. What? So they're just comparing it to the baseline that just ended 2 years ago. So just the last 20 years, the baseline of the last 20 years, or 30 years, sorry, math. So an even closer baseline, which is yesterday, compared to yesterday, it's quite a bit hotter, right? But I thought that was actually kind of wild. So 2 degrees Fahrenheit above the last 30 years, and was the third hottest July on records after 1936 and 2012. In Texas, it was the hottest July on records. And so I'm a little flabbergasted by the baseline of 1991 to 2020, but whatever. Just in historic flash flood events, juxtaposed heat and expanding drought during July 2021 temp ranked third warmest in the 128-year record for the contiguous U.S. Anyways, so that's very interesting, right? On the subject of flash floods, I don't know where did the guy go that was like, the rain clouds are being evaporated by microwave satellites. Okay. All right there, Jimbo. Something is a little inconsistent with that. Moving on. This is a good post from Gnawbone. This tweet is kind of hilarious. And you can't really see it on Colin, but the tweet says, boomers are like, kids don't play outside anymore. And the bottom of the tweet says, my brother in Christ, this is the outside you have made. So they're just showing, a typical normal street anywhere in the U.S. that's just filled with, gas stations and McDonald's and power lines and cars and buses. And there's not a lot of nature there. And Gnawbone says, it's not just foxes and wolves and butterflies running short on habitat. Humans too. Yeah, to go back to the, humans doing things at scale argument. Yeah, Poppy, yeah, no, I get that, but I think it's kind of funny. I think Poppy says, Kevin, I think different baselines are not trying to measure the changes since 1750. They're looking at different data sets. Yeah, but I mean, I just think it's a little funny, right? Well, and there's a purpose to looking at different data sets. If you're not looking at the data set since let's just say 1880. Let's not even say 1750. Well, if you look at a data set since 1880, then things look way more out of whack, and you don't want to do that. If you do that, then what? Everything is. Then things look a little more in the red, right? If you actually use the correct baselines, or, if you go like, here's where industrial civilization starts, and here's where we are now, right? But they're putting a baseline in the middle. How about here? Here's where we are now compared to I don't know, here. Yeah. Wow, this is a pretty good. Mark Bevis posted this. And so this is, I wanted to just briefly touch on this. Classic example of collapse in progress. So this is from The Guardian. Inside Somalia's vicious cycle of deforestation for charcoal. As gas prices rise, Somalis are turning to the affordable energy source, driving unsustainable logging as Al-Shabaab condemns but profits from the trade. So, so Al-Shabaab is I guess like extremist group that kind of runs part of Somalia, or maybe they run, I don't know if they run all of Somalia. Anyways, so they have set up laws against people cutting down trees, but apparently they're also profiting from the down of trees. So there's that. Which is, of course, right? As gas prices rise, Somalis are turning. I've read that. In Mogadishu, the charcoal trade is thriving on the city streets, prompted by the sharp rise in gas prices over the past 2 years. As more Somalis turn to charcoal as an affordable energy option, experts say the growing demand is fueling unsustainable levels of production and accelerating climate change amid the country's worst drought in 4 decades. Environmentalists say the situation is acute in the lower Shabelle region's Wan Lawane district, the center of the charcoal trade, about 55 miles northwest of the capital. The levels of deforestation have gotten so severe that most of the trees along the banks of the Shabelle River have been cleared out, says Abdelatif Hussein Omar, the executive director of Action for Environment, a conservation organization that operates in the Horn of Africa. In the south of the country, the lives of many pastoralists and farmers have been disrupted by extreme weather, so they have been looking for other ways to earn money, right? So their crops have been decimated by what? Extreme weather. And now they're like, well, one of the easiest or best ways to do it is to chop down trees and sell it for charcoal. Hussein says the environmental damage has caused a vicious cycle. It rains less because people are cutting down more trees to meet the demand for charcoal, which means crops are not able to grow, which affects farmers and livestock who depend on the land for survival. So desertification in action. Maulid Jama used to be a farmer but turned to logging after he lost his crops in the 2017 drought. Jama says that on an average day, he spots about 10 to 15 other loggers cutting trees in Lower Shabelle's forests. For a 2 to 3 month stretch, they cut down trees for wood until a lorry arrives to transport it to the outskirts of Mogadishu, where business people burn it into charcoal for sale. One logger, Hassan Omar, says it can take a full day to cut one tree. They are around a century old. He says he now has to travel 50 to 60 kilometers away from Wan Lawane, where he started logging, because all the tall trees there have been felled. We keep reaching town after town and going deeper into the woods. Lower Shabelle is a volatile region, one of the many parts of the country that is largely out of control of the Somali government, and there are no structured government-driven efforts to restrict logging. The jihadist group Al-Shabaab, which exercises control in some regions, has been trying to grow its influence in recent years by playing a quasi-governmental role on issues such as environmental protection. In 2018, it imposed a ban on single-use plastics and is enforcing crackdowns on cutting down of leafy trees. The Islamist group brutally enforces its policies. Well, here's, the future of climate change, right? Just random like fascist kind of decrees. You can't, you'll get harsh penalties for cutting down trees. But this, anyways, hold on. Al-Shabaab has ordered us to stop cutting down trees, but we can't. It's our only way to make money. What about the jobs? It sucks. It's brutal. It's a brutal reality, and I'm sorry to laugh. But it is literally. But what about the jobs, right? Because people can't just sustain themselves from the land anymore, right? They can't grow food. Welcome to the future of all things. And, apply this, it's a different situation, obviously, in Somalia, but apply this, I see this happening in the U.S. or possible, the possibility of this happening in the U.S., right? Like, you have millions of people living in an urban, take Texas, a few years ago during the deep freeze. You have millions of people living in an urban area, or whatever, in the city, and suddenly the power goes out, and let's say there's a deep freeze in the winter and there's no power and it goes on for weeks, and what if suddenly people are just out just chopping down trees because they got to build, they got to keep themselves warm. Right? And the government might say, like, well, you're not going to chop down those trees. And they're like, well, we're not going to freeze to death. So we're going to commence chopping. And this is just, how it's going to go as humans devour every last living resource in order to stay alive. And if as that sucks, that is a horrific situation. That is a horrific situation for the future of humanity. But we've kind of slow walked ourselves into this situation too. To people that, you can't have a conversation about overpopulation. I mean, imagine apply overpopulation to, you can compare it to an animal group, but then people would be like, we're not animals. Well, okay. Do you think nature really looks at us any differently than it looks at deer or boars or, any other animal, wild animal? Like imagine, a certain species of animal that has overpopulated a certain area, right? And they're devouring all the trees or all the animals that it feeds on, and now these animals are gone because there's this, and imagine it's a deer population. They're devouring, all the leaves off the trees, and they're completely, stripping this whole area of right? And then imagine the rest of the deers of the world saying, well, we can't let these deer die because they've outstripped all their resources, or the resources are gone. We've got to ship in food to these other deer so they can stay alive. And you're like, well, they outstripped all the resources in this one area. Or these deers are going to migrate over here and outstrip all the resources over here. Well, how dare you speak of the overpopulation situation of these deer over here because they've outstripped their, that's anti-deer, right? I mean, you see the ridiculousness of the argument, but when you apply it to humans, it's, oh my God, that's anti-human. Okay, really? Again, do you think nature looks at humans any differently than it looks at deer or, but I'm sure people will be like, but God says, or somebody says, no, I don't think so. We're clever, we're smart, we got some big brains, but if you think nature looks at us any differently than it looks at, whales or dolphins or salmon, I don't know. You think you're, the big brain there? You think that you're the big scientist brain there that can say somehow we're different, nature looks at us any differently? I don't think so. So, Poppy, I don't think I don't know if every study should start at 1880, but I think people call that out because I think because they feel like it's, people presenting this information are being disingenuous. I think that's the argument. I mean, 1750, 1880, 1980. I mean, I do think there is a validity in saying like, hey, you're shifting the baseline way forward, so things don't look as bad. I think there's validity to that argument, but anyways. So as this sounds like a horrific situation. And then environmentalists say government involvement is required to effectively regulate the trade. The public needs more environmental education, and it needs to start at an early age, blah, blah, blah. But imagine, if the government enacted, no more cutting down these trees. But people are out of work, don't have any income. They rebel against the government, right? And all the righties on YouTube or wherever on Rockfin are like, look at how they're oppressing the citizens. And it's like, well, I don't know. We're in a catch-22. We're trying to do something about the environment, and that's not a ridiculous thing to do, because if you destroy the environment, then nobody's going to be alive. And it's going to be painful for the people that have to make a change. I don't know. We're in a predicament, Again, just to get back to the point, to speak on overpopulation, to not speak on it, I think, is the highest form of lunacy, the highest form of kookiness, right? People try to call people that talk about overpopulation kooks. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. It's kookiness to just go like, la, 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 I don't know, I can't hear, I don't want to listen to you, I don't want to talk about this, la, 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 stick your fingers in your ears. We're kind of heading over a cliff it's called overshoot. We're decimating the planet hand over fist because we need the things. And if you don't give us all the things, it's anti-human. I mean, come on. Are you 3? Is that your level of understanding? Don't give me if you don't give me the things right now, the things that I want, I'm going to be like so mad. I don't know. Again, there's lots and lots of nuances to the conversation, but don't stop the conversation. There's lots of ways in which, this idea can be, a bad idea in the wrong hands. There's lots of ways in which, we can do the wrong thing or do the right thing. And, all those things should be discussed. It should be an open conversation about it. So I don't know. I think the people that can't talk about it are the lunatics. You're an absolute lunatic if you cannot have this conversation and have it calmly, and rationally, and say like, okay, there's lots of different wrinkles to this conversation. Okay. Phantomus, what's up? How you doing?
Good afternoon.
What's up?
I think the biggest problem is like what you're getting at, which is how everything is commerce is a religion, and everything is focused on out now or coming soon, or what's the next thing, and it seems like that's what everyone is geared toward to think about.
Right.
And I think that it's cancerous to us, because maybe it started out innocently enough, but now it's so fast what the next thing is, whether it's a TV show, whether it's some candy, whether it's a product, whether it's whatever it is, a headline, whatever it can be.
Yeah.
That's what's important. What is next? Even if something just comes out, did you hear about so and so? They still want to hear about the most frivolous things. They still want to buy the most frivolous things. Right. And ultimately, I don't think that our society can sustain this kind of, I don't know what we call it, hyper-consumerism, whatever it is. It's right. It's so disastrous to all of us. Right.
And and not being able to have a conversation about what we're doing actually leaves. This is the other thing that's really frustrating to me. So let's say, it's the WEF, or it's the Klaus Schwabs, or it's the Davos crowd, the Bill Gates, and all those, let's say it's those people, trying to make decisions about trying to steer humanity in a certain direction. Okay, so maybe you're against that. Maybe I'm against that, because maybe I don't want Bill Gates and those people steering humanity in the next direction. But we can't, but humanity itself can't have a conversation about, well, we don't want these people steering us into the future, but we can't actually have a conversation about the future. So we're going to leave those, we're leaving the conversation and the decisions to them. It's kind of like, I know that people are really into this, like, you think voting matters kind of thing, and I obviously we don't have good choices and we don't have a good voting system. So I don't know. We'll leave that conversation for another day about whether voting, is going to help anybody or not. Right. That's a nuanced conversation as well. But what I'm saying is, when you say government's bad and you don't vote and don't participate in the system, you're actually allowing the people that run the system to make all the decisions and just drive us forward, right? You're taking any oppositional energy away from them at all, and you're just letting them run amok, right? They're just running amok. They're just going to do what they're going to do, and it's just going to get worse, right? Because you've taken away everybody's agency to actually protest the government or try and get in government and try and change things or try and, somehow affect policy in some way or whatever it might be. You've told people just to take yourself out of the equation altogether. And I don't, I don't know. I see that has been going on for decades, and I see that the end result of that is more crap. Anyways.
It reminds me of the Simpsons character. I think his name was Ed Grimes or whatever, and he worked at the power plant. And he warned everyone about the dangers of the Springfield power plant and all the what they needed to fix. And he worried himself to death. And there's a scene at the end of the episode where they show a gravestone, and everyone ignored all of his warnings. And just keeps getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
At the Springfield power plant.
Right. Right.
The problem with this is you do end up because people start sounding frantic and people start thinking that, like, oh, this person's irrational, they're completely unhinged. But really, the most unhinged thing is not being frantic. The most unhinged thing is being calm as hell and seeing what's happening around you. That's the most unhinged thing right now.
Right. Well, and it goes back to, like, the serenity prayer, right? Like, grant me the serenity to change the things I can, or, not whatever, let go of the things I can't change. And the wisdom, the part of the serenity prayer is the wisdom to know the difference, right? So, you have people on the right saying, like, they're trying to, rightly saying, like, oh, they're cranking up the fear thing over this thing that you shouldn't be afraid of. But then they're also cranking up the fear thing about this thing that you absolutely should be afraid of. So it's the wisdom to know the difference. What is the thing that I should actually be fearful of? And then people get of course, people get overwhelmed by information, and they can't take it all in, and they're like, I don't know, am I supposed to care about all these things in the news, right? I'm overrun by news stories and headlines, and, that's the entire business model of mainstream media is to, try and stick a headline in your eyeball, like, at every second, like, oh my God, what's happening over here, right? To get that gets viewers, right? It's called clickbait or whatever you want to do, it's very difficult for people to discern what's the real problem and what isn't the problem, especially in this day and age. But anyways, thanks for the call, Phantomas. I'm going to try and cover a couple more things before we get out of here.
All right, see you later.
All right, thank you. All right. So, to round up my point, I think that not having the conversation about overpopulation or overshoot or overdoing it, humans overdoing it, we take ourselves out of actually conversing, discussing, contemplating what humanity is doing to itself. Because you've been told that you absolutely can't have those conversations, or if you do, you're a crazy person. I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, we have conversations about abortion, right? That's a big conversation right now. When does life start? What's reasonable? Is it totally unreasonable? It's a conversation that people are having, and people are, extremes on both sides of it. But I don't see why overpopulation or overshoot can't be a conversation that people are extreme about it. But I mean, people just absolutely go bonkers when you talk about it. Massive quantities of PFAS waste go unreported to EPA. U.S. Ecology failed to report more than 11 million pounds in Beatty, Nevada. Oh my God. Another instance of absolute runaway pollution going unreported. Oh my God. I'm so surprised. A waste management company received millions of pounds of waste containing toxic firefighting foam and other materials contaminated with the industrial chemicals known as PFAS in 2020, yet did not report it to the EPA according to public records. What did they do with it? Where did it go? U.S. Ecology, a hazardous waste company with dozens of sites around the U.S., received 11,638,732 pounds of waste containing the firefighting foam known as aqueous film-forming foam, or AFFF, at its facility in Beatty, Nevada, or Beatty, I don't know. In 2020, according to public reports filed under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, the company also received and did not report waste containing AFFF at its facilities in Robstown, Texas, and Grandview, Idaho. It is unclear whether the company's failure to disclose the waste violated the law or whether it's legal under the loophole in the reporting requirement. PFAS has also been used to make Teflon and hundreds of other products, which people happily consumed. And some of the compounds have been shown to cause health problems, including immune deficiency, cancer, liver damage, thyroid disease, decreased fertility, obesity, hormonal irregularities, and high cholesterol. Anyways. EPA loopholes violate law. Okay, right, we know. The EPA is a captured agency like most of them these days. Excuse me. Anyway, so why wouldn't they report these deliveries? I don't know. The discovery that huge amounts of PFAS contaminated waste are escaping the EPA's chemical tracking system comes just as the agency has begun to acknowledge the extreme toxicity of these industrial chemicals. So they're not tracking these chemicals. So maybe this is one of the things you should be really, really afraid of, right? Maybe this is one of the things that you should be absolutely downright terrified of. I don't know. I'm going to leave that right there. That's on The Intercept if you want to read that. Here's a weird story. The U.S. made a breakthrough. I think Gnawbone pushed this out. The U.S. made a breakthrough battery discovery, then gave the technology to China. Speaking of green technologies, we actually have had, lots of cutting edge renewable tech available to us, and probably, to go off a little alleyway, we have. There have been reports of somewhat magical technologies out there that have been absolutely shut down by the powers that be, right? Because they don't want to have, they would, if there was a free energy machine out there, they wouldn't want you to have it. Seen many things about people running their cars on water, right? And they absolutely can't have that. Again, I'm not saying that all these things are true or actually exist, but I'm just things you hear in the wind and see. I've actually seen videos of people making their cars run on water. I didn't know if they were actually true or not. I can't confirm whether they actually made their car run on water. It looked like they did. But I've heard lots of people talk about that. You know, it's one of those conversations that people have kind of spread around for a long time. The U.S. made a breakthrough battery discovery, then gave the technology to China. Why would they do that? What's happening? What's going on? Is it because why is it because it actually threatens a built-in obsolescence, destructive, toxic, consumerist society? Is that why it gave away this technology to China? Apparently this battery technology is pretty great. So they actually built it. It worked. They designed it, and now nobody in the U.S. can get a license to manufacture these batteries that last for years, last for a very long time. So this is what. So the U.S. has licensed this battery technology to China. So they're, I guess, building these batteries in China. But you cannot license this technology in the U.S. Again, why? Because it would get in the way of, planned obsolescence, hyper-consumerist, When the powers that be talk about renewable energy, what they mean is you're going to have to renew that thing pretty soon. You're going to have to upgrade that pretty soon. You're going to have to buy another one of those pretty soon. That's what they mean by renewable energy. You're going to have to renew that thing. You're going to have to buy a new one pretty soon. Because it only lasts for like 5 or 10 years. Sorry. Anyways, the idea for this vanadium redox battery began, or maybe it was Fantomas that sent me this. Vanadium redox battery began in the basement of a government lab 3 hours southeast of Seattle called Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. It was 2006, and more than 24 scientists began to suspect that a special mix of acid and electrolyte could hold unusual amounts of energy without degrading. They turned out to be right. It took 6 years and more than 15 million taxpayer dollars for scientists to uncover what they believed was a perfect vanadium battery recipe. Others had made several similar batteries with vanadium, but this mix was twice as powerful and did not appear to degrade the way cell phone batteries or even car batteries do. The researchers found the batteries capable of charging and recharging for as long as 30 years. And we can't have that. We cannot have that. Or I wonder if China is making these batteries for the right, like a, here I'm going to get conspiratorial now. Warning. They license this battery technology to China. China makes the batteries, and then secretly they buy it back. Some parts of the U.S. government buy these batteries back from China, but we can't have these on the open market, right? Anyways, very interesting story. And seems a bit fishy, doesn't it? And I think after this story came out, they they suspended the licensing to China. So that's very interesting too. I can't read the whole article right now, but also very interesting. Links will be on my Patreon page. Or you could just search this headline here. Okay, last one I want to show from Gonzalo Lira. This is quite interesting. This is from CNN. This is a CNN clip. He says, wow, CNN is telling the truth for once, kind of shocked. Here's some truth coming from CNN for the first time. CNN shows Ukrainians migrating from Zelensky-controlled areas to Russian-controlled Kherson with family, cats, dogs, trunks. They have chosen freedom and real democracy. So apparently, civilians are crossing into Russian-held territory. They're escaping the Donbass and other...
Waiting and waiting.
Anyways.
Families, pets, possessions loading them down. All crossing to the Russian-occupied territory, south of Zaporizhia. This is what's slowing everything up here. The deep mud, cars just getting bogged down, sliding all over. This one just managing to get through, and the reason they're coming this way, quite simple. The bridges are blown up. Ukrainian emergency services doing their best to get people through the rain-sodden fields. We've had to drag a few trucks out today, the commander says, but it's drying out and getting easier. Known as the Green Corridor, it's where people cross to and from Russian-occupied territory. But something odd this day, the traffic almost entirely one way. Of an estimated 6,000 people stuck on the Russian side, only 76 crossed. Many, many hundreds went the other way. Where are you going?
To Kherson.
Why?
Because my parents live in Kherson.
Is it dangerous because there are Russians controlling?
I know this, but I must to take from parents from Kherson to my city Odessa.
Everyone leaving Ukrainian-controlled territory telling us a similar thing. They expect to come back, even if it appears they're not. I'm taking my mother to the other side, he says, and picking up my grandmother. When we ask why he is taking his young daughter, he shrugs. If they were going to live on the Russian side, no one willing to admit it. The route working so well this day, several trucks taking the chance to turn a profit. This man, his van loaded with Pepsi and toilet paper, telling us he's taking it to market. The emergency services here say that on a normal day they get traffic coming from the occupied, the Russian-controlled side. Today it's different. They understand that there'll be nobody else coming from the Russian side today. No one any wiser why the Russians are still blocking.
Anyways, interesting video for your consideration. Yeah, it seems like things are, well, things are not what they seem, of course, in the news that you're getting about what's happening in Ukraine. And it also seems like there's kind of a massive shift in sentiment around what's going on in Ukraine. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. Thanks for hanging out with me every day on Rockfin, YouTube, and Callin. And I will see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Oh, thank you. Somebody gave me a tip on Rockfin yesterday. I didn't see it, so thank you. I can't remember who gave me a tip, but I appreciate it. All right, guys. Until next time, peace.